Hello and welcome. You're watching To The Point. Justice Katju's dramatic revelations raise one key question. Do we need to change the way our judges are chosen? Clearly, the collegium system is not working adequately, but is the National Judicial Commission proposed by the UPA and supported by the NDA the right answer? That's the debate in part 2, when the country's best-known lawyers will join me for our discussion. But first, the story that dominates the front pages today. Is Dr. Manmohan Singh guilty of putting pressure on the Supreme Court to promote a corrupt judge? Rather than stand up for principle and integrity, did he knowingly and willingly make damaging compromises? Or is that a hasty conclusion that can be easily questioned? That's the first big debate tonight. Now joining me to debate whether Dr. Manmohan Singh is guilty of trespassing on judicial independence is CPI Rajya Sabha MP D. Raja, BJD Lok Sabha MP Pinaki Mishra, BJP National Executive Member Sheshadri Chari and the former Vice Chairman of the Law Commission KTS Tulsi, who's willing tonight to defend Dr. Manmohan Singh. Bizarrely, the Congress party has stopped its spokespersons from joining discussions on this subject. Mr. Tulsi, yesterday the Law Minister revealed in Parliament that in 2005, the previous government had made two distinct attempts to encourage the Supreme Court Collegium to make a Madras High Court additional judge facing corruption allegations permanent, even though the Collegium didn't want to do this. Isn't this proof of the previous government A, pressurizing the judiciary and B, trespassing on judicial independence?
Not at all. I don't think anybody can pressurize judiciary and the judges don't get pressurized. But the Constitution envisages consultation between the constitutional authorities, that is the Chief Justice, the Prime Minister, the President. It comes to the Law Minister, and then the inquiries which are made by the executive, they are also taken into account. The Prime Minister has to form his own opinion to be able to advise the President as to how to act. And if his opinion, the Prime Minister definitely has the right to form his opinion which may be at variance with that of the Chief Justice, and then like his opinion to be placed before the Collegium, and Chief Justice or the Collegium, and whatever way they want to do it. But he has every right to express an opinion. That's the very purpose of the consultation process that is provided for in the Constitution. And if the Prime Minister has no business to, then how is the appointment going to be made? And in this case, there is no impropriety because the Chief Justice concurred with the view of the Prime Minister.
Well,
and not one Chief Justice. In fact, 3 Chief Justices concurred with the view.
I hear your argument. I hear your argument, Mr. Tulsi. Let me put the opposite of that argument in a sense to you, Pinaki Mishra. When in fact Chief Justice Lahoti responded to those 2 notes from the previous government, he agreed to give Justice Ashok Kumar an extension, but didn't in fact give him the permanency that the Prime Minister and the Law Minister were asking. And at that point of time, this is what Justice Lahoti recorded. He said that he was doing this because the sensitivity in the perception of the government in the matter. In your eyes, was those form of words proof that Justice Lahoti was accepting and acknowledging he was under pressure from the government?
I think there is absolutely no doubt in my mind that there is the grossest possible impropriety that has occurred both in the hands of the judiciary, as well as just what Justice Katju said only confirms that the Congress party's rough and ready methods and their skullduggery in running governments is come to the fore. That a senior minister can say that I will go to the Chief Justice and work this out for the Prime Minister. That is number one. That's shocking. Number 2, the fact that the Chief Justice seems to have not taken the concurrence of 2 other judges and has sent this name for an additional period of 1 year. This is confirmed by Justice Ruma Pal, one of the Collegium judges. And number 3, that with this kind of entries, adverse entries, that he was subsequently appointed by another Chief Justice of this country, this really is absolutely appalling. And I don't think this should be, swept under the carpet. I think the full facts must come out. This is classic Manmohan Singh now, as it turns out. the classic Bhishma Pitama kind of role that he has always played. He knows everything that is going around him. But on paper and on file, what he has done is what Mr. Tulsi is saying, which is the process of so-called consultation. So the Prime Minister therefore will appear blameless. But if what Justice Katju said, that a senior minister assured the Prime Minister that he was going to sort
I have
this
to stop you there. We have no proof. We have no proof that particular statement from Mr. Katju is correct. Mr. Katju himself made it clear that he was depending there on what people had told him. He thought those people were credible, but he also had no proof. So we can't actually take as gospel truth that a senior minister actually went on behalf of the Prime Minister to speak to the Chief Justice. We just don't know. But I'm just making that clear because I think it's only right we should be fair.
Then I cannot, Karan, understand what persuaded Chief Justice Lahoti, what he meant by the government's concerns in this matter. I have absolutely no doubt that the Chief Justice should not have been concerned about the government's concerns.
All right. That's perfectly fair. Let me put to you, Shashadri Chari, another alternative explanation. Mr. Bharadwaj says that in fact the two letters sent by A, the Prime Minister, and B, by the Department of Justice were nothing more than legitimate attempts to ask questions and to seek explanations, which the government has a right to do. Why can you not accept that explanation?
No, how can we accept this explanation, Karan? See, it is very clear contravention of the judicial process. This very clearly indicates that not only the Prime Minister's office, the Law Ministry was functioning as a super Prime Minister's office, because the Prime Minister's office was not controlling the Law Ministry. It was 10 Janpath which was controlling the Law Ministry. And we should not forget, these are not just not reading into this act or some sentences from the Constitution or the provisions. We are looking into the working and the minds of people who are actually manning the UPA government. And if you look at the antecedents of these people who are managing the government, they were all at the bidding of 10 Janpath, and it is very clear that 10 Janpath wanted this extension. Now what is to be seen is,
can I ask you a question? How do you know it's clear 10 Janpath wanted this extension?
Why did not the Prime Minister put his foot down?
How do you know 10 Janpath wanted this extension? That's not even something that Mr. Katju has said. At no point has Mr. Katju mentioned 10 Janpath or Sonia Gandhi or Rahul Gandhi.
How do we know that 10 Janpath was not involved? At whose bidding? No, Karan, find out at whose bidding was Mr. Bharadwaj working.
So you're making an assumption.
Did he have a motive?
You're making an assumption.
If he had a motive,
what
was it?
You're assuming that Mr. Bharadwaj was working at the bidding of Sonia Gandhi. That's your assumption.
No, it is not the question of assumption. Read what he has written.
Stick with one subject for a moment. I'll come back to you. I'll come back to you. Let's not deflect to another subject. Let's stick with this for a while. Mr. Raja, I want to put a third different interpretation to you. After all, if the collegium had wanted to, they could have easily stuck by their decision not to confirm or extend Ashok Kumar. The Chief Justice and the collegium had a right to stand by that decision. So I put it again, if they wanted to, they could have stood by it. And there are clearly many occasions before 2005 when in similar circumstances they've stood by similar decisions which they insisted on. So if in this instance the collegium agreed or Justice Lahoti agreed to change his mind, surely the explanation is because he thought again and came to a different conclusion. How do you know changing his mind for good reasons of his own is not the right explanation of what happened?
Exactly, that is the issue. What is emerging really indicates the question of judicial independence or independence of the judiciary. When there is a collegium, I doubt whether judiciary can or as independence. The revelations are very clear, and the judicial independence of judiciary became the casualty. As you are saying, collegium could have taken an independent position. Why collegium did not take an independent position on this matter?
Can I put this to you? What makes you believe the independence of the judiciary is at stake if the Chief Justice willingly changes his mind? He has a right to change his mind, and if he does, why is that A, under pressure, and B, why does it undermine the independence of the judiciary?
Exactly that he has to explain. That is why we have been demanding we should have a National Judicial Commission.
No, but let's not jump to the National Judicial Commission. Stick to this. Let's not jump to the National Judicial Commission. Stick to this instance. You're saying that Justice Lahoti must explain why he changed his mind before you believe it was changed genuinely rather than under pressure. Is that what you're saying?
I am not saying attributing anything to what the justice has done. The justice must explain, because now things have gone to the extent the whole nation is debating. Okay. Now the justice has to explain if there was interference or there was influence by the Prime Minister's office or by the Prime Minister, the then Prime Minister. The then Prime Minister is member of the Parliament even today.
Okay.
He was an answer. It is for him to explain to the nation.
All right.
What was his role at that point of time.
All right. Let me bring you in, KTS Tulsi, and I want to build on that point that you've heard a moment ago from Mr. Raja, who says that in fact Justice Lahoti must explain why he changed his mind about Ashok Kumar. And I'll give you a second reason why it's incumbent on Justice Lahoti to explain, and that is because Justice Rumapal, who sat with him on that collegium when he took a decision not to promote Ashok Kumar, has told the Times of India, and I'm quoting, whatever Justice Katju has said is true, which clearly proves that someone virtually at his right hand has said that Justice Lahoti was under pressure, and that decision that he took to extend Ashok Kumar was made under government pressure. That's why Justice Lahoti must explain.
Well, I believe that the actions of the then Prime Minister as well as the then Chief Justice of India were perfectly in conformity with the enunciation of the constitutional principle in the words of Dr. Ambedkar. At that time also, Dr. Ambedkar said, when a question was raised as to what should be the role of the Chief Justice in the matter of appointment of judges and what should be the role of the government, and Dr. Ambedkar says, and I quote this sentence, to allow the Chief Justice practically a veto upon the appointment of judges is really to transfer the authority to the Chief Justice, which we are not prepared to vest in the President or the government of the day.
Mr. Tulsi, you're being very clever. You're going back to Dr. Ambedkar, forgetting that in 1992 and again in 1998, the Supreme Court itself passed judgments changing the manner in which judges are appointed. And surely, in line with those two judgments, Mr. Lahoti's behavior is to undermine the principles the Supreme Court established for appointing judges. And that's what Justice Rumapal herself is complaining about.
No, you see, Justice Rumapal perhaps is not aware of the fact that Justice Lahoti also had the recommendation of the Chief Justice of Madras High Court. I don't know whether it is Mr. Katju himself or someone else, but there was a recommendation of the Chief Justice of the Madras High Court, and that is how the Chief Justice of India accepted the proposal to extend his tenure.
Let me bring in Shashank.
There is no question.
All right, you're complicating the matter. You're saying in opposition and juxtaposition to Justice Rumapal telling the Times of India that what Katju has said is true, is in fact the stand taken by the Chief Justice of the Madras High Court, which you believe recommended that Ashok Kumar should be promoted, and therefore Justice Lahoti perhaps was right in changing his mind, even though many people believe he did it unilaterally without going back.
I accept that. Needs to tell us whether he sent this recommendation. Justice Katju should tell us whether he sent the recommendation, and if he did, how is he raising this hullabaloo?
Well, yes, of course, but Justice Katju isn't here to do it, but it's a good question to note. Let me go back to you, Mr. Chardi. You see, in this whole question about how much Dr. Manmohan Singh is to blame and whether he's guilty or not guilty of putting pressure on the judiciary and trespassing on their independence, there is a very important statement made by Justice Lahoti himself, who is the man who's supposed to have been trespassed upon, he's the man who's supposed to have been pressurized by the Prime Minister. And this is what he says: I have done nothing wrong. He says, please look up the records and see for yourself. Clearly, that is Justice Lahoti saying, I didn't act under pressure. I've done nothing wrong. I may have changed my mind, but I have a right to change my mind. Every time I change my mind, it isn't happening under pressure. A man can be convinced that his original position may not have been the right one, and therefore he changes his mind. That's in a sense what Justice Lahoti is saying. Why are you contradicting it, or why are you not believing it?
No, the question is not what Honorable Justice Lahoti is saying. If we take it as true, he says, I have every right to change my mind. We cannot question his integrity now. But what is important is, he should explain what made him change his mind. What was the intervention made by the Prime Minister's office that changed his mind? Why did he do that? And after changing his mind and after the extension, we should find out what are the case that this particular justice has decided, in which way have these cases have been decided, in what who has been favored, and what is the benefit that has accrued to the person concerned in all the cases where this particular judge has made a decision.
I'm going to interrupt you.
And I think here,
I'm going to interrupt
Justice
you. What you're saying to me,
Lahoti
Mr.
has
Chari,
come clean on the fact that there was intervention.
And Mr. Chari, what you're saying to me is you will finally conclude on the question, is Dr. Manmohan Singh guilty or not guilty of interfering and pressurizing judiciary, when you've heard Justice Lahoti's explanation for changing his mind. If that explanation convinces you, Dr. Manmohan Singh won't be guilty. If that explanation doesn't convince you, Dr. Manmohan Singh will be guilty. In a nutshell, that's what you're saying.
No, the fact that Justice Lahoti says, I changed my mind, very clearly indicates that there has been some reason for him to change his mind.
Okay.
And that reason obviously emanates from the Prime Minister's office.
Yeah, but it could be a good reason rather than a bad reason. And if a man changes his mind for a good reason, that's not to say he's doing it under pressure. That's the point I'm making. But anyway, let's not quarrel with each other. Let me bring in Pinaki Mishra. Let me bring in Pinaki Mishra and put this to you.
Then Justice Lahoti will have to say that. And whether this was a good reason or a bad reason, we will have to go into the details of what are the decisions
that's
that
the point I made earlier. We are now in agreement with each other. We are now in agreement. Pinaki Mishra, I want to bring you in and I want to be honest about this and say this to you. Two issues seem to have got intermingled in this matter, and I want to ask you which of the two is more important. On the one hand, there is pressure from the government to extend and promote Ashok Kumar. On the other hand, there is a decision by the Chief Justice to change his mind and try and meet the government halfway. Now, is the outcome of this a Chief Justice operating under pressure, or is the outcome a reasonable Chief Justice hearing the Prime Minister saying to himself, well, there may be something in what the Prime Minister says, I may not have thought about it, maybe I ought to meet him halfway because that's the fair and proper thing to do. So which is it? A decision under pressure, or a sensible, reasonable compromise made by a man who says, the PM has a point which I never thought of earlier, now I'll take it on board?
Look, Karan, let's not pussyfoot about this. The fact of the matter is the Congress's track record of skullduggery in dealing with institutions of any kind under the Constitution is well known. So therefore, the fact that they've tried to interfere in the appointment process is not something that surprises me at all. Now, you're missing the point here. Chief Justice Lahoti could not have changed his mind on his own. Chief Justice Lahoti was bound by our system now under the various judgments of the Supreme Court to consult his collegium members if he wants to change his mind. Did the entire collegium change their mind? That's the point. You're missing the point here. Chief Justice Lahoti alone couldn't change his mind. The entire collegium had to be consulted. Justice Rumapal, whose integrity, incidentally, let me tell you, over the last 15-20 years, I don't think there has been a judge in the High Court and the Supreme Court whose integrity has been more above reproach and unimpeachable than Justice Rumapal's.
Can I interrupt you there?
Everybody will
Let me interrupt you there because you're big.
For her to have endorsed,
no, let me interrupt you. We're running out of time and I want to point out something. What you're really saying is that if Justice Lahoti changed his mind without consulting and getting the concurrence of the collegium, then he was acting unilaterally and therefore he was also acting wrongly, and that suggests that he individually succumbed to pressure from the Prime Minister. You may be right.
That's right.
But that point you're making actually raises issues.
That's right.
But that point you're making raises issues not so much about the Prime Minister's letters to Lahoti, it raises issues about Lahoti's behavior, his treatment of the collegium, and the fact that as a Chief Justice, he didn't act properly. Those are issues about the Chief Justice that you're talking about, not so much about the PM. It's the Chief Justice who's now in the dock in your eyes.
I think the Prime Minister's, very happy if his government survives. So the Prime Minister and people around him are indulging in all kinds of shenanigans. The Prime Minister is not too concerned as long as he survives day to day.
That may be a fair point.
I'm more concerned about the institution of the judiciary and how that institution has got compromised in this entire thing irreparably, according to me, in the eyes of the people.
And that was in fact the point I was bringing out, because the bigger concern here is that if in fact Justice Lahoti allowed a man to be either extended or promoted despite the fact there was an adverse IB report, that's the other critical thing that Mr. Katju said, then clearly this Chief Justice was not standing up for transparency and integrity, and he clearly was not doing everything he's required to do to keep out inappropriate people from the judiciary. Would you accept with a yes or no answer that that is a second question about Justice Lahoti, and it puts Justice Lahoti in the dock, not the former Prime Minister? A quick answer from you, Pinaki Mishra.
Look, I have no doubt that certain questions have to be answered. Somebody must come out absolutely honestly and say if the entire collegium decided along with Justice Rumapal, then there could well be a case for reconsideration. But if the two other judges of the collegium, as Justice Rumapal seems to indicate, were kept out of this process, then that's a very serious matter. I'm not surprised that the Congress then was very happy to give him further extensions, and that another Chief Justice then went ahead and appointed him as a permanent judge.
I'm going to stop you there. I want to go to. I'm running out of time. I want to go to Mr. Tulsi for one last question, and I want a very short answer, Mr. Tulsi, so that we can stick within some measure of time. Justice Katju made it clear that everything hinges in this instance on whether there was or wasn't an adverse IB report against Justice Ashok Kumar. Now, if there was an IB report that was adverse, the PM and the Law Minister would have known as well. Now, if despite that they were insisting on this man being promoted or extended, then they were clearly in the wrong. And in those instances, these letters were not letters of explanation and clarification. These letters were an attempt to override an adverse IB report. That's the problem that, in fact, Mr. Bharadwaj and Dr. Manmohan Singh have to explain.
No. Karan, I want to say that the IB reports are unverified reports. And merely that there is an IB report doesn't mean a thing. They have to be weighed by the government and by the Chief Justice in the collegium.
Okay.
They consider as to whether they pertain to the period after his appointment or before his appointment, whether they are relevant or not relevant to what is the gravity of those reports. And they have been taken into account, and I would only say that after taking into account everything, there is a judgment of the Supreme Court with regard to this appointment where they said that the recommendation of the Madras High Court was there, and all the details which are required in accordance with the memorandum are there on record.
I hear you.
And they found no impropriety,
Mr. Tulsi,
nothing wrong with the appointment.
I hear you.
With
You're
the decision of Justice
whether
Lahoti.
IB reports are relevant. You're questioning about the nature of depth and accuracy of those reports, and you may well be right. Soli Surabji did much the same on this very program on Monday. But I have to point out that on the very basis of those IB reports, the collegium's first decision was in fact to refuse to make Ashok Kumar permanent. That was then overturned, and all I'm questioning when I raise this issue is whether the PM was aware of those and whether Mr. Lahoti acted in accordance with those or in defiance of those reports. But I'm afraid we've really run out of time. My thanks to all four of my guests. This is an issue that's going to rumble in our politics as far as our former Prime Minister is concerned. It's going to rumble as far as the way in which judges are chosen for the future.